How do you feel, what value do you place on having access to resources in a physical environment and having a space that is beautiful and for your community?
I feel like having a physical access to information is different than the way that we use technology to just Google something. You can stick in a name of somebody in Google and 20 different websites will pop up and they will all have the same half page of information. And you can go to the Fine Arts Library and look up that same person and find 10 complete books that have everything about their process, their thought process, their technique process, their lives. It's just, there's more to take from. There's more to put back into your own work. And I think that it allows you to be more original.
Do you think because you're an artist and probably a visual person, do you feel like confined, like when you type in Google and there's just what you're talking about, that's the search page, and you have your titles and you have an abstract and they all look exactly the same, and so do you find that when you're in the Fine Arts Library that you tend to drift around, or you being able to actually see things or see where you traverse?
I have a really weird way of finding information in the library.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily go in always looking for a particular artist. Sometimes I will just walk around the bookshelves and just like pick out books that look like aesthetically pleasing to me, or whose titles seem funky or that stick out in my head. And then I'll sit down and flip through them, and some I'll put back or some I'll put up, and I'll just keep doing that till I've got a couple to check out and I'm ready to go, and I go home and like really go through them.
Did you ever find anything really or did you ever find like just something great in that process?
The last time that I was in the library, I found this book on I believe it was like ceramics in Deutschland. It's like German ceramics, and I can't read any of the book. It's all in German. But just going through the images and finding ceramics that are aesthetically what I want to be making, and then to be able to like take those and work them into my installation got me just really excited about this show in particular. Mm-hmm. So my most recent visit would be
so in a way
best example.
So if you think of, we tend to think of records as very textual things, but what you just described, like that's all based on visual. You mapped the space visually, you traversed it, and then what you found was you were interested in the pictures, you couldn't understand the text. So do you think that type of searching or that type of making sense of the world through images, do you see that in your own practice or your work?
Yeah, I think that I am a primarily visual learner, and that has to translate into my artwork.
Mm-hmm. So could you describe maybe a little bit of your process of how you maybe connect things that you've been inspired by into physical pieces, or a like grouping of objects, or how you kind of, I don't have a good word to describe it, but you kind of know what I'm talking about, just that pulling from one thing and pushing out something, and how you kind of make sense of that,
I look through a lot of images in books and online, and I kind of keep boards online through Pinterest, which sounds really corny.
No, I do the same thing.
I keep tons of them, and then I also keep like physical boards. I'll like Xerox books and keep physical boards. But then I will look for the shape of something that I want, or color. I look at color a lot, and so I'll take the shape of something from one object that I like, and maybe it's a teapot but I take that shape and make it into a cup or something that's not even functional. And then from something else, I'll take a color that I really loved and then find a color that clashes with it that I loved and see how they work together.
So you make collections sometimes. So would you say you have lots of collections based on things that they're not normally classified that way in a library, like color, shape, form, because that's how you in your mind, that's how you like to group?
Yeah.
And
especially in my 3D work, I group things by form and by color and by texture more than I do by what kind of artwork they are or who they're by, which is probably why I don't specifically go look for someone, but I just go through and aesthetically pick out random books.
Yeah, I think that's something really interesting about artists. I think. So can you maybe connect that, and if you can, it's fine, but we talked originally about how you were just so drawn to the light and the space of that place, which is not necessarily its primary function. Could you maybe connect why that was what, whenever I first asked you that question, that's what you brought up first, and maybe why you are attracted to things maybe based on not necessarily what they're intended to be?
I'm not sure. I feel like the light kind of tunnels through the Fine Arts Library. And so I probably do find myself in the lighter areas of the library. But I'm not sure.
I think what I'm kind of trying to guide you toward is the library collection is there. It's for a specific purpose, right. But you right now are actively working on your artwork, and there's a lot of different ways to describe what it means to be an artist, but you as an artist, you are there to, like, what do you feel like your role as an artist is as far as making things, or how do you think that how do you feel when you describe artist? It's
hard for me. As an artist personally, what I try to attain in my art,
I think, what do you think whenever, like for me, like I think of artists as the people who maybe look for things that they maybe find essences or traces of maybe not the primary function of whether it's a space or an object or a concept of a person, but they find ways to pull that out in whatever way is meaningful to them. So how do you feel about your practice? In your practice, do you feel like you do that sometimes?
I feel like art is about opening communication between people. I like to show people different ways to see things. It's really hard for me to keep politics out of my work, but I think that it's a way for people of all different backgrounds to have a conversation about the same thing. And so a lot of times I use my art to try to bring up a topic, but in a way that's inviting to people.
Yeah, and so going back to, you work a lot of three-dimensionally, which it changes perceptions of space. So how do you feel that your work, what's your process on making spaces inviting or to start conversations?
Well, I guess I was a little misleading because sometimes I make spaces uninviting. So maybe I do focus more on just trying to get people to address a subject. I work a lot with print, serigraphy, and turning it into wallpapers. And sometimes the actual wallpaper will have what I feel is the confrontational part of my art, and sometimes it'll be the ceramics that I add on top of it. So I like to mix the two mediums.
And do you feel that, so we talked a little bit about things being lost in technology, so do you think that this is a way to help you, or to help communication? Like, how do you feel that three-dimensionality and space and material help you communicate?
Yeah, I think that three-dimensional work is great for inviting people in, because you see something three-dimensional and something in you wants to touch it, you know, and so you're automatically drawn to it. And then I think sometimes the two-dimensional work is what people are more familiar with when they think of art. And so having the two together, I think, allows people to not be as afraid to participate in the art. That's another reason why I like installation, because all of a sudden there's this whole space, and you're in this space, and the viewer is in the space, and they have to, even if it's just for a second, experience what you're trying to say. And if they don't like it, you know, or if it's something that makes them uncomfortable or that they're afraid of, they can leave, you know. Or if it's something that intrigues them but they're not really sure what it is, they stay longer. And there's just something about being surrounded by a piece of artwork instead of just standing in front of it that I think is, I think that it reaches a wider audience that way.
Do you think it helps people form memories, stronger memories of something, to be able to participate?
It definitely would for me, because I am visual and tactile. And so because I'm that way, I think that other people are that way. It's just, I guess it's more than one sensory.
Yeah, no, I think that what you're describing, I think that's a big question for me, is with the digital space is so vast, it's so huge, but how do we create good metaphors for feeling like we're actually a part of it, you know? Right. Some people don't have as much problems, you know, they can comment back and forth, they're really okay with the flatness, or they've found metaphors within themselves. But this will be the last question, but how do you feel, we talked so much about the importance of materiality and being surrounded by physical space to help you interact. Do you see any, is there anything that you would maybe like to see in a digital space that would help you feel more like you could have these same types of interaction, or is there something, or do you see something really lacking when you're online?
Space.
Maybe we'll scale it back. That is a really hard question. That's like,
I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah, it's what I'm writing a research paper on right now. That's why I'm talking
It's a good
about.
question, because I struggle with technology a lot.
Yeah.
I tried graphic design for like a brief moment in time. Like, I cannot sit at a computer this long. I just can't. It just makes me kind of sad. And I think it is that lack of nature, you know, or there's not a lot of face-to-face communication. There's not a lot of touch or natural light, or it just seemed very cold to me, so it's hard for me to...
Yeah, so, and then the coldness, I think, is what a lot of people have struggle with, but we obviously want to make the web very inclusive, or we want to make spaces inclusive for people, right, especially if there's knowledge to be had. So I'm just trying to think of a good question.
Maybe it's our language and the way we describe the internet, because you're talking about it as a space, but I think of it as a screen. You know, I guess I had never really thought of the internet as a space. But
well, I'm an optimist. I'm a very big optimist. I'm very hopeful for one day where it does feel like a space, like it feels like a place that you can go to that's it's that same type of what you described beautifully about how when you first walk into a library, I think for a lot of people there's still a huge disconnect. And so that's why I think it's important to capture people's memories of these physical spaces, because you have, I mean, maybe you can kind of say this in your own words, but how do you feel like that space has, what impressions has it left on you, or emotions, or what do you feel like that place has has for you?
The biggest impression that it had on me was letting me be alone with myself. That was a huge gift. And I mean, it's not like all of a sudden, one trip to the library and I was fine, being by myself in my own head with nothing going on. But it let me realize this feels uncomfortable and it shouldn't. And you were able,
and it was because you were able to return?
I need to work on it. Yeah, and I can keep going back to that space to work on it, and then I can practice being by myself at home, being by myself in public places. So
for you, I mean, and I kind of want you to say this, but do you feel like it was the space itself? I mean, the resources were very, very helpful, but do you feel like even just having that space that was for you was really important? Like, how do you feel? What importance do you think, or how important do you think it is for communities such as artists or other kind of maybe communities that don't bring in as much money, or maybe not have the strongest participation, or they're vulnerable communities? What importance do you think it is for them to have spaces for knowledge?
I think that everybody needs a space where they feel that they belong. And because I'm an artist, I feel automatically like the fine arts library is somewhere that no one's going to question why I'm there. And so that does let me be vulnerable enough to be by myself. And yeah, I think that everyone deserves a space provided to them where they feel safe.
No, that's